As the host of Neutralize the Mama Trauma podcast, I am delighted to be able to bring you this podcast. My name is Wendy Lopez, and I would like to introduce myself to you. I specialize in helping people overcome their emotional blocks through different techniques, through emotional empowerment coaching and compassionate healing light facilitation. As a mom who has experienced narcissistic trauma, I help moms eradicate self-doubt in order to regain self-confidence to elevate their status both at home and at work. In our podcast, we discuss people's struggles, triumphs, and failures. We dive deeper into self-love, self-compassion, self-acceptance, and mindful, holistic tips. In every episode, I hope that you can take a golden nugget of advice and apply it to the journey of motherhood in order to raise your level of awareness. Welcome to Neutralize the Mama Trauma podcast, where you find healing and creative mental thought advice from experts on past pain, narcissistic experiences, and trauma. Brooke is a certified hypnotherapist and creator of Happy Body Blueprint, a course that teaches women how to build sustainable health with self-hypnosis so they can ditch the diet for good. She combines her passion for the mind-body connection with a bachelor's degree in psychology, a 200-hour yoga instructor certification, and unique skill set as a former applied behavioral therapist. Brooke aims to help women heal their negative inner self-talk so they can free up headspace for more motivation, happiness, and healthier choices. It is her goal to empower women to reconnect with their bodies and create long-term sustainable health. Welcome. I'm so excited to have you here. I know we were chatting before the podcast and we really hit it off, and there's some points that I want to cover. But first, I want you to let us know how you became who you are today, but what struggle or trauma that you went through that directed you to this path.
Yeah, I would say there's probably 2 points in my life. First was around the age of 30. At the time, I was an events director. I was a busybody. I had what a term that I've read recently that I actually love because I self-proclaim this. I had busy woman syndrome, where I was constantly keeping myself moving. I didn't know how to sit still. I didn't know how to calm my mind. The idea of meditation or even just a yoga class sounded not fun for me because I didn't know how to calm down and actually sit with myself. And around that time, I was 31 years old, and I developed high blood pressure. I got diagnosed with high blood pressure, and I was very physically healthy. I was working out a lot. I ate pretty good. I had this high blood pressure, and I realized it was due to the stress I was experiencing in my life, functioning constantly in a state of fight or flight. And so I actually decided to try hypnotherapy around that time. A friend of mine had a friend who was a hypnotherapist, and I thought, this could be interesting. And so I tried it, and it was like, for the first time in my life, I experienced the relief of spending time in the space between thoughts. It was the first time in my life that I realized just because I have a thought doesn't mean it's true. And if it's a thought that doesn't feel good to me, then I can choose to let go of it. I can choose which thoughts to entertain. And so hypnotherapy really opened that world up for me. It helped me. I accessed what I now call that jacuzzi for the brain. And so I started meditating. I started doing yoga. I eventually became a yoga teacher. My life completely started to shift. I sometimes look back at my life and I think for the first 29 years of my life, I was asleep. And started living from a state of presence and awareness and choice. What direction do I want my life to move in? I felt like I wasn't just floating through life. And then a couple years later, so I started practicing hypnotherapy, and I would do hypnosis, self-hypnosis on my own. And it was a tool that I was using. And in early 2020, this was probably the second life shift. We had a very sudden death in the family. My 2.5-year-old nephew didn't wake up from a nap. And it was January 2020. So because of everything closing down shortly after that, it took us 7 months till we even found out that he had a heart condition we didn't know about. And it was very sudden. And I had just moved into a new apartment in a new town. And I had just been hired by a company. So I was working around all new people. And at the time, it created a level of, for the first time in my life, I was experiencing panic attacks, obviously going through a lot of grief. And I felt like the world didn't feel safe anymore. Everything felt very fragile. Like if a 2.5-year-old just doesn't wake up from a nap, then everything felt, who knows when something else could happen. And at that time, I started turning to hypnosis for relief from panic attacks. So I would be at my office and I would start feeling this, like the feeling of, oh my gosh, what's happening? The room's closing in on me. And I would grab my headphones. I would leave the office. I'd go into my car. I'd put in headphones and I'd put on an audio hypnosis. And it didn't matter what the topic was. 15 minutes later, I would open my eyes and I'd be like, okay, we're good. And that's when I started realizing the power of getting into alpha theta brainwave state. It really activates parasympathetic. It pulls you out of fight or flight. And so and also what happened at that time, we had this loss. And then March 2020 happened two months later, I guess. Everything shut down in California where I live. They closed yoga studios, gyms, all of those things that were my normal coping mechanisms were taken away. It felt like at the time. And so I started experiencing changes in my body. I started having joint pain. I had shoulder pain. My body felt very stiff. All of these things were happening. And slowly over time, it was like I was starting to notice my body was gaining weight and these changes were happening and I didn't feel like myself. And it was then and also picked up some unhelpful habits during lockdown. We started baking, having wine in the afternoon, right? On times when I wouldn't normally have wine. So it was a combination of my body's living in a state of chronic fight or flight. And so all systems started, when you're in that state of chronic fight or flight, blood flow is going to hands and feet for fighting and running, right? It's not moving through the digestive system to help you digest. It's not helping those areas that, for healing. And so that was the first time in my life I realized, like, this is how the body holds grief. This is how the body holds trauma. I really felt that grief from loss. And then with COVID on top of it, the world, everything that was happening in the world, I really carried that in my body. And I knew at the time I could feel that my nervous system was just on hyper alert. And so I started turning towards hypnosis to change some of my habits, get back on track with food, and alcohol, and sugar, and also just calm the nervous system so that my body could start to heal again. And that's what inspired me. I'd been doing hypnotherapy and hypnosis for many years, and I'd always loved it. And that's what inspired me to go back, get my degree or my certification. It was a year-long program, and start teaching other women how to do this, how to use this, because of how it shifted in my life and really helped me heal through that very, very difficult time.
Right. So at the age of 31, when you were diagnosed with high blood pressure, you used yoga to start bringing your stress levels down. At that point, were you doing any hypnotherapy or
Yes.
hypnotherapy? Oh, you were doing some of that.
So I had started dabbling in yoga, but this is like a belief system that I see a lot with clients that I also have myself. I was an athlete in college. I played field hockey.
Okay.
So for me, movement had to be really rigorous and intense. I had belief systems about, well, in order for movement to count, it needs to be super intense. So what got me into yoga was hot yoga and yoga sculpt, right? It was all these like one-offs. It wasn't the slow attention to the breath, but it was what got me interested in it. So I started doing that. And then in that around 30, 31, when I got diagnosed with high blood pressure, then I did hypnotherapy. And when I started doing hypnotherapy, I suddenly had a craving for that calmness. Like once I got a little taste of like, this is what it actually feels like to slow the mind down. I didn't know what it felt like. I'd never experienced it before. I'd just been distracting my entire life. And once I felt that, I started seeking out opportunities where I could access that state. And so one thing that I like to share is that hypnosis is simply just alpha theta brainwave state. It's something that we all go in and out of daily naturally. So meditation or shavasana at the end of a yoga class is essentially that same hypnotic state. So it's all very related. I mean, in hypnotherapy, it's like taking meditation, but it's meditation with a goal. So you're actually trying to create specific change with it. Meditation and shavasana are types of hypnosis. They're alpha theta brainwaves. They're just different modes of getting there. And I found hypnotherapy was kind of like the straw that broke the camel's back. Like I was doing yoga, hot yoga. I was doing Bikram at the time and yoga sculpt. But all those classes would have those periods of shavasana at the end. And I would experience a little bit.
Gotcha.
And then hypnosis took it to the next level. That's when I was like, oh, actually, I could just sit down and do a countdown and listen to this audio recording or work with a hypnotherapist, and I can get to that state without moving through a 90-minute yoga class.
Right. And so from what I'm hearing, and I wanted to land with the moms, is when you said you had that women disease syndrome, right? That created high blood pressure. And there's a lot of moms that, want to be that super mom because of what is imposed of us to, work, to take care of the house, to, doctor's appointments, to soccer, and so you can add so much to the list. But what I want them to really hear in your story is that you had that, and it was so ingrained that even doing a particular yoga, you needed that push, that harsh kind of
the stimulation
body. Because it was more like body, right? But the beauty was that you were able to, because of the slowness that they brought towards the end. You said the name of it, right?
Shavasana. Yeah.
What was it called?
Shavasana.
Okay. That it allowed you to have a sliver of space.
Yes.
And which you mentioned earlier, you said space between thoughts.
Yes.
Right? And so that is the beauty that we can, not only a beauty, but a gift that we can give ourselves.
Yes.
To have a space between thoughts so we can really tune in to nothingness for a moment.
Yes.
Right? And it's calmness, right?
Cultivating calm.
Yes. Right.
Yes.
So that's so beautiful that even though, you were very aware now that you're, telling us that it needed to be like rigorous yoga, because I've done hot yoga and I can't do it.
It's not for everyone. And I do it now because I'm like, I don't need all that. Now I can just, do a little bit of stretching and count myself.
Yes, exactly.
It was the avenue that brought me to that space.
Right. And that's what I like, that it brought you to that space where then you became a yoga teacher instructor. Right.
And what's interesting and what I know now that is so powerful when I look back on that 30-year-old version of me and when I work with my clients, it doesn't take, I know we're all busy. We all have a million things to do, but it doesn't take that much time, even just 5 minutes a day in the morning of carving out that space, you start to rewire the brain. So what you're doing is you're teaching the brain and the nervous system how to transition out of fight or flight and into that parasympathetic nervous system, the rest and digest. Muscle. I like to think of it as a muscle. It's going to the calm gym, and it can take 5 minutes a day, but that little shift, because what happens is when we're operating in chronic fight or flight, the nervous system forgets how to turn off. Stress isn't all bad, right? We need stress. Stress is what helps us take action to move out of homeostasis, right? It's what causes us to get up and run from the tiger, right? It's a survival.
Yes. So we do need that, right?
Right. We need that. But what happens is, and I think what's happened in a lot of modern day culture, especially because we're constantly exposed to the news worldwide. We wake up in the morning, we look at our cell phones, we look at social media, we're getting bombarded constantly.
Right.
And so it's important that we recognize this is actually causing the nervous system to just stay in alert mode all the time. And that's not healthy. That's what causes inflammation. So we have to carve out time to actually hit the off switch. And the more you hit the off switch, the easier it gets. That's what resilience is.
Oh, can you repeat that again so it lands with the audience, what you just said, and that's what resilience is?
So resilience is simply learning how to hit that off switch and being able to transition out of stress quicker and quicker, essentially. Because what happens is, like, we might experience, okay, we're on the highway and someone cuts us off and we have a stress response. Now, if you've been operating in chronic like busyness, you have that stress response and your body is stressed for the rest of the day. But when you're practicing a little bit of calm each day, someone can cut you off and there's stress response and you're like, huh, and then a few deep breaths and it's okay, just let it go, come back to present, come back to parasympathetic. There's no tiger chasing me. I'm safe.
Yes. And I love that. So I just want to share something because we're all human. We're still doing our work, and I had a incident at Sam's Club yesterday with a lady who gave my 10-year-old a dirty look because she expected him to know that she needed to go a certain way. And I ended up blocking her to the pathway of checking out. And then he ended up blocking her, but she gave me like a dirty look. And I was like, okay. But then when she gave it to my son, I kind of blew up, right? So it's that like, that mama bear coming out, right?
Mama bear is like, there's a tiger attacking us. Keep all the company safe.
Yes. But what I love what you said was about the resilience, because I didn't know this is what I did now that you shared that. So then thereafter, words were exchanged and she told me and I told her whatever. Then I left Sam's Club, and then we were driving and my husband says, oh, well, I hope, she didn't put you in a bad mood. And I was like, no, she didn't. And it was kind of like, I took care of what I had to take care of.
Yeah.
And then I was able to get out of that fight, flight, or freeze, right?
Yes.
Right. So that's what I love when you said about resilience.
Yeah.
So if we can learn that more and more, wow, the world would be a greater place.
Yep. And it also helps us relate to stress differently. Because and that's what can help us relate to things like anxiety differently. When we start to realize that the rapid heartbeat and the shortness of breath, it's simply your body just doing what it does best. It's your body is reacting without you even having to think about it, and it thinks it's protecting you. And so instead of being like, oh my gosh, I can't believe I reacted to that, or I can't believe I'm reacting to this, or oh no, I'm feeling panic, we can be like, oh, interesting. This is just my primitive fight or flight response. Body is sending blood flow to hands and feet, shortening the breath so that I can fight and run. But I know consciously I'm safe. So I can take a few deep breaths and I can
Um,
move out of it. And then we stop, we stop pushing against it so much. I think there's also, as a mom, I'm sure many moms feel this. I know with my clients, this is something we see a lot. It's like, well, I have all of this going on, and there's like almost this guilt of like, well, how am I supposed to be unstressed if I've got all this going on and I feel guilty about not taking time and not doing all the things I should be doing, right? And we can stop feeling guilty about it. Stress is normal. Stress is going to come up. The practice is practicing transitioning out of it, going to the calm gym for just a few minutes a day so that you can start to retrain the nervous system how to activate, rest, and digest. And then you'll notice the rest of your life becomes a little bit, you can flow through those difficult moments easier, like you said, because you can transition out of that reaction and make better decisions and be more present and live a more present life and not feel like you're making decisions out of that stress.
Right. And I was looking at something that you mentioned about that you yourself were on antidepressants and anti-anxiety medication.
Yes.
Yeah.
So, and I always preface this with, I'm going to share this story, and I'm not sharing it to tell anybody that they need to stop taking any medication that they need, because there's a time and place for that.
There is.
But I do love to share this story because I think it just shows the power of when you have the right tools, you can change your brain. You can rewire your brain with mindset tools and with a practice. That's how powerful these tools are. And that's how powerful the healing power of the body is. I was on antidepressants probably for about 7 years, up until around 30, 31. So around that time is when when I started doing hypnotherapy and I started practicing meditation. I went to my doctor and I said, my next goal is to gradually get off of the medication that I've been on. And so very, very gradually with his help, I moved off of it. I did it over a span of like 3 months, because I wanted to cut it in half and then level out, and then cut it in half and then level out. And, but what I learned is with meditation, with hypnosis, I had the awareness to be able to feel, okay, I'm feeling anxiety. Anxiety impacts me differently now. Now I know when I feel something in my chest, that's anxiety. That's where I experience it. Everyone experiences differently. They might hold it in their shoulders. They might hold it in their stomach or their low back, right? For me, it manifested in my chest. And so through inner child work, through meditation, I learned to relate to that anxiety differently so that it wouldn't take over. It wasn't who I was. It was just an experience, a passing emotion that I was experiencing. And that was 6 years ago. And I haven't had to go back onto a medication since.
So how old were you when you started antidepressant medication?
I was 24.
Okay. And you did it for 7 years?
Yeah. And at the time it's funny. This is something that this is probably the first time I've really spoken very openly in an interview about this.
Thank you.
But at the time I was 24, and I just remember feeling like I was constantly digging myself out of a hole, like a happiness hole. Like I needed the stimulation of big things to feel like that dopamine or that happiness, that things that made other people happy. Simple things like reading a good book, time with family, a job that they loved, didn't make me feel baseline happy.
Oh.
At the time, I didn't have good practices. I was very unaware of my thought. I had very negative self-talk. I had a lot of negative belief systems. I had no meditation practice. I wasn't doing yoga at the time. I was living on the East Coast. I had never been to a yoga class. I just was very unaware. And I thought that my thoughts, like I was trapped by my thoughts. I thought that they were all true, every single last one of them, no matter what they said. And just didn't have the tools. But, I don't think that I look back and I don't regret that time because I do remember taking a meditation class in college and I was like, I don't get it. Right? I don't get it. And it just I wasn't ready for it yet. There were certain things that had to happen in my life in order for me to really be ready for it.
Right.
And also I do feel that it was hypnotherapy really pulled the needle. There was something in the hypnotherapy. It really like helped me tap into a feeling that was rewarding that I'd never felt before. Before I didn't realize calmness or stillness could actually feel good.
Interesting.
Because, we're operating, a lot of us have operated. I know this is how I was, and I know a lot of my clients say this. We're operating in a constant state of fight or flight that getting quiet and sitting with ourselves does not feel good because it's not normal.
Right.
It's homeostasis, right? If your homeostasis is busy woman, if you have to sit quietly with yourself, that's a little scary. And I get it.
It is. It's so true.
But when you really decide to go there and sit with it, there is so much reward on the other side of it.
Yes. And I want to bring something to the forefront now that you said that. Let's not have difficult challenges come across your life to experience a calmer side of you. Because that's when we have, that's when we learn a different way of coping, right? Mm-hmm. And so if we could just embrace, so like for example, if someone comes across this podcast and they feel that they don't really need anything, that everything is fine, I still would encourage them to reach out to you, how you could help them from wherever they think they're normal, because there's more to than that normal state of thinking that everything is fine. It can be greater.
Yeah.
Right? It can be livelier.
Yeah.
And so I encourage not just to be at the space of trauma, but also if you're just happy, to come across the podcast today, to really reach out and see what more is there in you.
Yeah.
Right? What greatness is there that can be discovered? Because before the podcast, or before I hit record, we talked about the unconscious and inner child healing. And so I do want to touch about that because I felt what you were telling me about, because it's Christmas time right now, how going and visiting family can make a person digress back to the 8-year-old. Can you share more on that? Because I feel it's really important.
Yeah. Well, first, let me explain a little bit about the subconscious mind and the conscious mind.
Yes.
So what I teach my clients is that a lot of us learn when we're prior to the age of 8, we don't have a critical area of the mind. We don't have that critical filter, that logic and reasoning. And so we're like little sponges, right? Every experience we have, we develop a known about that. So when we're little, doesn't mean that we don't change or learn new things past the age of 8, but a lot of the patterns that we engage in now are patterns that started prior to that age. Because the critical mind is like a filter, and it decides like what we actually, when we're perceiving the world. The critical mind is that left brain, and it decides, is this in alignment with my beliefs about who I am, my identity, what the stories that I tell myself every single day. It acts as a filter on your perception based on your subconscious belief systems. Area of the brain develops around the age of 8. And so I like to look at, and that area separates the conscious from the subconscious. And only about 10% of our mind is conscious. That's where willpower, logic, and reasoning live. 90% of our mind is subconscious. And this is what a lot of psychologists say about habits, right? 90% of the things that you engage in every single day, the actions you take, are actually completely habitual. You don't even realize you're doing it. So habits are part of that subconscious. And this is okay because our brains can't possibly take in everything all at once. So from like perception standpoint, we're getting hit with billions of sensory input any given moment. Sight, sound, smell, touch, taste. And so our critical mind is part of the filter that decides, well, we can't take all of this in. So let's sort this into patterns based on what our beliefs are and what our knowns are for the world. And so the critical mind deletes, distorts, or generalizes our perception and experience based on subconscious belief systems. So that's why we could be moving through life and you might say everything's great, but there's probably things that are running your life that you don't realize that were established around the age of 8 or prior to that. And so on some level, it's kind of like there's an 8-year-old running the show when it comes to our conscious.
Right.
And that's why inner child work is really powerful through this framework, because we're looking at it as we're going back and reparenting that child that learned a certain way of being in the world, and teaching him or her how to be a new way. So it's really, it kind of bodes well with that. So to your question though about the holidays, and I mentioned earlier, there's like a Rumi quote, and the exact quote, I'm not exactly sure, but he says something like, if you think you're enlightened, go have dinner with your family or go spend a week with your family. And this is something that I notice. And even as someone who does this work myself, it doesn't matter how much work you've done or where you're at in your journey. It's an interesting learning opportunity when we go and spend. I just got back home from 8 days with family over the holidays. And I noticed that when I go back, the dynamics are so strong, and you're with your mom and dad and your siblings. And it's like, we revert back to that 8-year-old version of us. I notice it in myself. I notice it's, I just try to be gentle with myself and say, okay, this is going to come up and this is a great learning experience. Shift. How can I respond differently? But it's a huge challenge.
Yes. And going back to how you were explaining the unconscious and subconscious, and you said about the age of there is the critical mind, there's no filter. Can you explain that again? That there's no filter. You said from 7 below or 8 below?
So that part of the mind starts developing around the age of 8. So for example,
okay.
Like that's why 8 years old is when kids. Now, do you have any kids that listen to your podcast?
No, not right now, but they're older. Yeah.
So I laugh because I brought this up in a podcast once, and then someone was like, "My kid's going to listen to this."
Oh.
Around the age of 8 is when kids start questioning Santa Claus, the Tooth Fairy, all of the things that they've and they're like, wait a second, this doesn't really make sense anymore. That's because they're starting to develop that critical mind.
Okay, so from 8 below, they don't have that filter.
Yeah, they're kind of like little sponges, like whatever you tell me, that sounds great. That's, I remember going to Disney World and there were Ewoks, and my parents were like, look at the Ewoks. And I was like, oh my gosh, there's Ewoks. I believed them, right? I thought they were real. I joked that I thought they were real well into my 20s, but
oh my goodness. Yes. So that's why it's important to realize the parts that we're working with, because it believes, right? Versus the filtering where, like you said, we start questioning.
Yeah. And the filtering so when that critical mind develops, it sort of solidifies those patterns, those beliefs about who I am, the stories that I tell about myself. And we call those knowns. So that could be like, for me, my known for functioning in the world was busy woman syndrome, or just being busy, or just being constantly distracted. That was just a known that I had. That's how I lived my life. I had never experienced calm, really, or that space between thought. And so we're working with homeostasis when we start creating change, because we have to move out of what's known and into what's unknown.
Right.
And
Yes.
in the beginning, that can feel uncomfortable because the body and the brain wants to, it's pleasurable to stay with what's known, even if it's not helping you, right?
Mhm.
Even if it's not beneficial to you, it's familiar. It's the devil you know.
Right, right. And so that's why I want to clarify for moms that are listening. So you're saying that the knowns get solidified, but the knowns are really is something that you end up either observing or just knowing to be a truth. And then you start doing patterns from
Yeah.
the
It's like
knowns,
the
right?
self-fulfilling prophecy, right? You've got the belief system, and then you start
Mhm.
experiencing the world, and you filter out, if you have certain belief systems about, what you're capable of, or what is available to you,
Mhm.
from a career standpoint, right? You might not even apply for a job that's over a certain salary, or you might not even see the opportunity because you have a belief system about what's available to you. You might not take action on
Right,
it.
right,
But when you
right,
shift
right.
the belief, then you start taking action on things that this is the same. There's actually an area of the brain called reticular activating system, if you
Okay.
know RAS,
Mhm.
but
All right.
that's part of this. It's the same system that's at work. If you've ever been standing in a really crowded room and it's loud and there's lots of noise, but someone says your name and you snap to attention, you're
Mm.
like, I heard Wendy, and Wendy's
Mhm.
important to me. It's my name. So you filtered out all of that other noise to hear your name. Or if you've ever been making like a really big purchase, like you're looking for a car, and you decide, I want this type of make and model. I want a blue
Mhm.
Jeep Cherokee. I used to have one, so that's why I always go to that.
Mhm.
So you start seeing blue Jeep Cherokees everywhere on the road. Your neighbor's got one. It's not that the blue Jeep Cherokees there's more of them. It's that now your brain's not filtering them out. They're of value to you now.
Oh, I love that.
Yeah. So it's really, this is a mechanism of the brain that we know is part of
There.
our.
Yeah.
So it's really important to get clear on like, what are the stories you're telling yourself every day, and what are the things you're saying to yourself every day? What are your beliefs? And it because it's defining your life.
Right. Absolutely. Absolutely.
And it can feel like, well, I know this can feel like, well, I've had so many experiences in my life to validate this belief, so I know it's true, right?
Mhm.
But when you
Mhm.
really ask yourself, is it true, or is it the belief that puts you in situations, or you interact with the world in certain ways that could be perpetuating this pattern, right?
Mhm. Mhm.
And also, I like this. I know, like Byron Katie, she does the work.
Mhm.
There's a book.
I've heard of her. Uh-huh.
Is it asking the question? Is it true?
Mhm.
And that's great work. But also, I love another way of looking at this, because sometimes that can be hard when someone really feels this is true for me, right?
Mhm. Mhm.
So the other question you can ask is, it might be true, but is it helpful?
Mhm. Mhm. Right. And I like that because then you can form and assess if that attachment to what you believe is true is really helping you.
Yes. And then you
And
make a choice.
yes, then you make a choice of,
And in the
um,
beginning, the choice, and this is where like affirmations come in, or
mhm,
using hypnotherapy, and I'll
mhm,
explain how that works in just a moment. But like affirmations are kind of like you're making a choice about a belief, and you're choosing to say something differently to yourself. And when you repeat a thought, repeated over time, becomes a belief,
mhm,
eventually becomes a worldview.
mhm,
And that's why
mhm,
affirmations do work. And
mhm,
begin
mhm,
can feel really weird. You're just saying it to yourself over and over again, but that's homeostasis.
mhm,
Well, this is
mhm,
all right. Your brain's like, this isn't known to us. So
mhm.
just have to keep repeating. Repetition. You're firing neurons that like are rewiring a new neural pathway in the brain. And it is important when working with affirmations that you work with affirmations that feel somewhat true to you.
Mm-hmm.
so that you can
Mm-hmm.
actually feel that emotion in your body of, well, this could be true, as
Mm-hmm.
opposed to just saying something to yourself that isn't true, right? Because I know
Mm-hmm.
people will ask me, well, we're not trying to bypass your experience
Mm-hmm.
by just telling ourselves something different. We want to
Mm-hmm.
validate the experience you're having and then choose a new thought, choose a new internal self-talk that's more conducive to the outcome that you're looking for.
Right. Working with my clients with affirmations, I've learned that there can be blockages to the belief of the affirmation. So it won't
Yes.
really coincide with what they want to receive from that affirmation. So we need to, because I like how you worded it, making some space within the thought. So if you make some space within the thought of the affirmation, then you can allow for then that to become a truth. So
Yes.
so I do like the fact that you said you can have it where it starts resonating with you, like it already resonates with you, but there's some affirmations that are really out there that is
Right.
not resonating with you. And then what I don't want to happen is for the person to think that it's not working for them.
Right.
It does, because words are vibration.
Yes.
It just shows that you just may be it may be too beyond. But if that is something that is luring you, then I would suggest to work on that.
Yes. So
Mm-hmm.
starting with, it's like baby steps, right? So
Mm-hmm.
an affirmation doesn't feel good. It's not a good vibration for them. It just
Right.
reminds them that they don't have something. It might be 2
Yes.
steps ahead. You want
Yes.
to find something that feels like it's a small step ahead and it
Mm-hmm.
feels like it could be true. There's an aspect of this that could be true. One thing I'm going to apply this to give an example is with internal self-talk about like body image.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
I work with a lot of women on health, wellness, their body, and just a lot of women saying, I look in the mirror and I can't find anything about my body that I love right now. And I
Mm-hmm.
say, okay, well then let's not start with your body. Let's start with something about you that feels true. Are you proud of the
Mm.
mom that you are?
Yes.
Are you grateful to your body for giving birth to 3 healthy children? Let's just start with that.
Yeah.
Let's
Right.
talk about the
That's
shape of it.
exactly, yes, that's a great example. That's exactly what I wanted to get to, because I've been there, and this is why I have the podcast. This is the whole purpose of it, is to let moms know that there's nothing wrong with them, especially being in this trauma, in the thick of it. Because when we're in the thick of things, we can't see beyond what we're going through. But
Mhm.
this is why I have my guests here, because you guys have gone through your stuff. I've gone through my stuff. And here we are with the reward of having a successful business, doing what we love, having purpose and fulfillment in our life,
Mhm.
right?
Yeah.
But we started with baby steps, and it has to be where it starts resonating with you. And then you can build upon that to make more space, right?
Mhm.
For the productive thought, for that productive feeling. And I love the tactic that you use about, what you said, starting from the gratitude or the appreciation of whatever part in their body, and you took it all the way back to when you had your child.
Mhm.
Let's start from there. That's so
Yeah.
powerful. Thank you for
Yeah.
sharing that.
And it's, what I also like to stress, and I think this is in alignment with what you and I are both saying with choosing those right words for yourself, is
Hmm.
that ultimately what's so powerful here is we want to get you feeling something that's positive. We want to get positive emotions
Hmm.
in the body.
Right.
You're feeling positive, the brain's changing, you're utilizing an area of the brain that emits positive responses in the body.
Hmm.
Your body can then heal. Your body can
Hmm.
let go of excess weight that it's been holding on to out of fight or
Hmm.
flight. So
Hmm.
we want to go with the best feeling thought.
Yes. Yes.
And
Yes.
so if there's an
Absolutely.
affirmation that feels like too many steps ahead, it doesn't feel good.
Hmm.
Starting with something that does feel somewhat true and can
Hmm.
get better, because it's all about emotion. And the
Yes.
thing is, it's interesting. We're trying to create change, Wendy. I love to come back to this idea of we might be trying to change things in our environment, right? Whether it's career, our body, whatever,
whatever it may be.
But ultimately, what we're all trying to do is we're trying to get to a state of being that is one of joy, love, contentment, whatever it is for you and for, whoever you're working with. We're all trying to get to an emotional state. And so if we can practice that emotional state every day for just a few minutes, we start to experience that emotional state internally, and then everything around us starts to shift.
Right.
And this is where it comes to like homeostasis and creating a new known. When you start to practice the emotional state, you're creating a known in the body for what it feels like to actually feel good.
Yes. And I love that, because then also too, we're helping, our clients validate their true thoughts, their true feelings of who they really are. And that's all we're looking for, right? Is validation. And if moms can get that, then they can really also help validate their children.
Yes, absolutely. There it is. There. And that's because you're breaking the pattern.
Yeah, right. So beautiful. High five. I really like that. Yeah.
I love this stuff. I could just geek on it.
I know, me too. Me too. So before we close,
I want one more
go
thing really quickly to just kind of like pull it all together, because we talked about the critical mind, subconscious, and how it filters. So the reason that hypnosis or hypnotherapy is so powerful is because when you get into alpha theta brainwave state, the left side of the brain where the critical mind is becomes less active. So it gives you that part of the brain isn't blocking the new affirmation, the new idea, the new thought. So that's what allows you to really drop that new affirmation or that new way of being, creating imagery around how do I want to feel every day? What does it look like when there's no critical mind saying, no, I've spent my entire life trying to do this and it never worked before and it's not going to work again. The critical mind goes to sleep so we can access subconscious and create the new known.
Yes. And with your experience, before we close, I want to ask you this question. With your experience with what is the, what is the left critical mind's purpose? Why do we have that? Like, what is it there to do?
Well, we need it to survive, right? That's what,
so we do
that's
need
that
it
part
to
of the brain that helps us interact with the world. And this like comes back to a bigger existential question, right? Of meditation and spirituality and all these things are amazing, right? But life is all about balance. We're not here to spend, there are some monks in the world that spend a good bit of their time in meditation and that's their purpose, right? But for many of us, our purpose for being here isn't to spend all of our time just in meditation. We need the critical mind is what brings us back into the world. It's what helps us survive, because we have to organize the world in patterns in order to process it.
Okay.
Right. And it's what keeps us tied in and interested in our everyday lives.
So we need balance in it then.
Yes.
Oh, okay.
It's like, I like another way of thinking about it is it's like the bouncer of the club. It decides who gets to come in. We want people in the club, right?
Right.
On the club, you want people inside, but you don't, maybe you want to like have a line outside and decide who gets to come into your club, right? So that's another way of looking at it.
I like it. Okay. And is there anything else that you like? Actually, is there a tip or an advice that you can give to moms that they can perhaps put it into a daily practice that's pretty practical?
Yes. So every single morning after you wake up in the morning, you're coming out of delta brainwave state and you're moving through theta and then alpha brainwave state before you're fully alert and awake. So you're moving through that hypnotic state. So the first like 20, 30 minutes of your day are sacred. In a state where the critical mind isn't that active. So you want to do two things. Number one, you want to be very mindful of what you're putting into your mind at that time. Are you looking at your email or watching the news or looking at social media right away? Because your critical filter is not active at that time. So you don't want to take in all that stress or negative news at a time when you don't have a critical filter to sort of sift out, like, okay, well, this isn't part of my life. This is just negativity out in the world, right? You don't want to take that in. So number one, you want to be really conscious and maybe give yourself a buffer of time before you look at news, phone, whatnot. And number two, you can utilize that time because you're already in alpha theta brainwave state. You're set up for a meditation. You're already ready for a 5 calm practice. Set your day. As soon as you open your eyes, you could do it in those first 10 minutes, or I actually walk outside and get a little sunlight in my eyes to wake me up, and then I come back in and I do my meditation. But that is a morning ritual. Making that morning time sacred is one of the most powerful things you can do for your day, for carving out space. So yeah.
Beautiful. Thank you.
I also have a free training at happybodyblueprint.com. So I offer free training on how to use hypnosis, understanding the theory of mind, and dives a little deeper into some of this. So
can you tell us how the audience can connect with you online?
Yeah. So happybodyblueprint.com is one way. Also, I'm on Instagram at Brooke Ansley Wellness. And I love to hear from you. So if you find me on Instagram, drop me a message, send me a follow, let me know that you listen to the podcast. Ask me any questions. I love answering questions. It helps me understand what women are looking for in terms of their health and wellness. So please do reach out with your questions so I can answer them for you. And yeah.
Beautiful. Thank you so much. What a pleasure. And I'm so glad we connected, and I hope we can collaborate soon with other projects that I have coming on with Neutralize Mama Trauma. Thank you so much. Appreciate it.
Thanks, Wendy.
See you soon. You're welcome. Thank you for taking the time to listen to Neutralize the Mama Trauma podcast. If you haven't already, please hit the like and subscribe button so you don't miss any new episodes. It would also mean the world to me if you're able to take a moment and rate and review my podcast on how it was helpful to you. Also, please connect with me on my social media platforms. Thank you so much, and I hope to see you in the next episode.